Still in the corridors of justice, Kenya has not carried out an execution for over 30 years. Thousands, however, remain on death row and continue to be sentenced to death due to the automatic nature of death penalty. In December 2017, the Supreme Court of Kenya declared the mandatory death penalty unconstitutional. What does this mean and how will it affect prisoners currently on death row and the future of sentencing in Kenya? Here's more. Kenya is one of the 17 African countries that are considered de facto abolitionist states, meaning that they have not carried out any execution in the past 10 years.
Actual execution has not taken place in Kenya since 1987, but nonetheless, those convicted for death-eligible offences are still being sentenced to death. So whether Kenya should consider abolition now in law. However, it just hasn't happened, and the question is why.
In Kenya's case, the last execution took place in 1987 when Hezekiah Ochuka and Pancras Oteyo Okumu were executed for their involvement in a failed attempt to overthrow President Daniel Arap Moi in 1982.
The experience of a death sentence can break a man, even the strongest man ever. You wake up in the morning expecting that the president may think of executing you. You wake up in the morning thinking that that is your last day.
However, in July 2023, the Court of Appeal made a significant ruling declaring life sentences unconstitutional. Judges Pauline Namwea, Jesse Lasit, and George Odunga unanimously decided that it is unjust to outlaw mandatory death sentences only to condemn individuals to spend the rest of their lives behind bars.
Joseph Kuria Irungu alias Joey.
Joey Irungu's sentencing has sparked a debate about death penalty in Kenya and the debate on whether the penalty should continue to exist or abolished.
Death sentence is unconstitutional and that it did not declare the death sentence unconstitutional. And so without going into other areas of submissions which are reflected in my judgment hearing, the prosecution invited this court to pronounce a death sentence.
According to Section 204 of the Penal Code, initially it stated that anyone found guilty of murder, treason, or armed robbery will be sentenced to death. However, this section was later amended, replacing the word death with life imprisonment. Despite a 2017 declaration by the Supreme Court that the mandatory death penalty for murder is unconstitutional, death sentences were still being handed down by the courts. By the end of 2021, there were 601 people in death row and 14 death sentences had been passed that year.
Death penalty is not a deterrent. Research has indicated that death penalty is not effective in fighting crime, and therefore its application does not make the society any safer. Violence in form of death penalty only contributes to more violence by the populace.
In both 2007 and 2015, the Kenyan Parliament voted against the abolition of the death penalty, rejecting bills initiated by individual lawmakers.
Why is conviction and sentencing a class issue in this country?
This debate is also in the continent in Africa. There are organizations, and ICJ is part of them. We are trying to develop what is called a protocol to the abolition of the death penalty.
However, in 2009, President Mwai Kibaki, and in 2016, President Uhuru Kenyatta changed the sentences of all death row prisoners to life imprisonment. It is important to note that in Kenya, a life sentence is considered to last until death and not through execution.
The amendments that we are proposing, we are going to give a period, say 25 years, that defines now the life sentence. Between death and life imprisonment, there is really, it's the same, isn't it? In terms of you are confined, you are incommunicado for the rest of your life. I mean, you are buried here.
President William Ruto, in a Gazette notice dated July 19, 2023, made a significant decision to reduce the death sentence imposed on capital offenders as of November 21, 2022, to a life sentence. This move marked a shift in the conviction rule following the recommendation from the Advisory Committee on the Power of Mercy chaired by Attorney General Justin Muturi. The Power of Act 2011, as outlined in Article 133 of the Constitution of Kenya, grants the President the authority to exercise mercy power based on the advice of the Advisory Committee. This includes the ability to grant a free or conditional pardon to individuals convicted of offences, as well as the discretion to delay the execution of a punishment, substitute a less severe penalty, or remit part or all of a sentence. In October 2023, Chief Justice Martha Koome took a proactive step by proposing to Parliament the removal of the death penalty for crimes such as murder, violent theft, and treason. This proposal aimed to align Kenya's law more closely with international human rights standards, as Chief Justice Martha Koome highlighted the need to update laws from 1930 to reflect a more modern and humane approach towards capital offenders.
Nyinyi wote.
For Maisha Prime, Maisha Television, I'm Rita Kering Chibet.